Hello, this is Troy Carpenter here with this episode. Today we're going to discuss how to get perfect freestyle lines in Blender. And FreeStyle Lines is the line software that Blender uses. I'm going to show images here on the screen of different line work that might be done in cell shading animation. Also, FreeStyle Lines can be done for like engineering to show blueprint lines and things of that nature, or in marketing and advertising for different products for to show engineering of stuff. But so the problem with freestyle lines in Blender is that I have one camera here that's 2.5 feet away from the character, and then I have another camera here, the super long shot camera, that is 1/6 of a mile away from the character. So really how the freestyle line works is that it takes the rendered image. It can't do this in the viewport display because it needs the rendered image, and it figures out how many pixels wide to make the freestyle or the line work. The problem with just having a normal freestyle line work is that really close up you might have it right, but then really far away the lines will still be the thickness they were close up, and then the animation or the final render, if you're still an image user of Blender, will be completely filled in with all of the freestyle lines, and it won't be possible to make any of the actual work out. So to enable freestyle, the first step you do is on the Scenes tab here in Blender 2.8. By the way, I'm using Blender 2.8 version 0.48. So to enable the freestyle lines in the Scenes tab is you go to Freestyle and you just check it, and then that enables it. If you use this drop down here, you can't see it very well because I have this Activate Windows layer here, but there's absolute, which you pick the thickness of the line, how many pixels wide to make it. This is what I was talking about, the issue with very far away. If it's 1 pixel wide very far away and you have tons of characters or tons of whatever's being freestyled, it tends to just clutter the screen with a bunch of thick lines. So what you want to do is relative. Now relative, if you've ever worked with freestyle, you know it's much more tricky than absolute. The next thing you do is you go to the View Layers tab. I deleted it because I was working here, but in the View Layers tab there should automatically be one of these pieces that has this here, the line set fill, the item here, and then you can add different line sets for different things such as contours. You might have one color, a suggestive contour. You might have a different line style versus a border or a silhouette, and you can find the definition of all of these things in the Blender documentation on their website, but I find this unimportant for my work in animation. I think it'll be, as of right now, for Updraftia Studios, it's unimportant. So just close this because it's a lot of options and it can distract you. Also close this next one. But this last one, style, we want freestyle line style. The first tab you look at is color, and this is, you don't have to do this. If you want all your lines to be black or whatever color, you can just make it whatever color. I'm just going to make it black for default for the unassigned things, and then go to this add modifier and do material. And what that does is, if I select your skin here, you can see that it has this freestyle lines color here, and you can adjust it. Let me just grab this color before I adjust it. And you can make it different colors. But here I'm just going to put that old color back in, and you can do it for things, for the other items in the scene. It has different colors for different items. But back into the View Layer tab, the next tab to look at is the thickness line, and this is what the video is about, getting the perfect thickness. So the modifier stack down here that I'm going to add just one modifier to, the first item is the thickness, and whatever the modifier stack decides should be the thickness of the line, it multiplies this by whatever's in the thickness here to get the correct number of pixels, or the number of pixels that is used in the render. I'm just going to change this to 1 to make the math simpler, so it's multiplied by 1. And the only modifier I really find useful is the distance from camera, and this is, I think, the most important one. So the range minimum is basically the closest the effect is going to have before it just is a standard thickness. So the range minimum should be 1/4 of a foot, or 0.25 feet. So basically, if it gets closer than 1/4 of a foot, what that will do is it'll have it at the thickness for the value maximum. And that thickness I am going to make 3. Oh, and by the way, click this invert button, and what that does is it makes these values diagonal. We want inverted because the further away from the camera is how we want it to be thinner than closer to the camera. Right now it does the opposite, so hit that invert button and make sure it's checked. The range maximum, this is how far away from the camera. Remember that the super long shot is 1/6 of a mile from the camera. I'm just going to make this 100 feet. It makes the math much simpler later on in this tutorial to keep it at 100 feet. The value minimum can stay at 0, so basically beyond this range maximum of 100 feet, the value is going to be 0, and 0 multiplied by 1, it's going to be 0 pixels wide, and the value maximum is going to be what it's at 1/4 of a foot, because it's doing this diagonal thing because it's inverted. So let's go to the first. I'm going to go to the, let's see, the scene layers tab, and I'm just going to choose the close-up camera, which is the one selected. Let me just change the display mode to image editor and change this to image editor. This is the render I did to test some of this stuff, but let me just do a quick one. I'm going to save because I might crash with the screen recording software also going. And as you see, I'm pretty satisfied with this line work. It seems to be a pretty good thickness for this close-up. It's not too thin, like you can still see some stylistic effects, which is part of the reason you'd want FreeStyle. So overall, I think this thickness is pretty great for range for the close-up shot. Now let me change in this to the scenes tab, go to the super long shot, which is the 1/6 of a mile shot, and render this. And as you can see, it's very pixelated because this is very far away, but basically there's no FreeStyle line because it's over the value maximum 100 feet, and the value minimum is set to 0 pixels. Now I will note that I am working at 4K resolution, 16:9 aspect ratio, 4K resolution, 3840 pixels by 2160 pixels. If you are working in regular full HD and not ultra HD, you should change this thickness so you can use the same numbers down here in this modifier. Change the thickness to 0.5 because full HD is half the resolution of ultra HD, and I'll basically multiply all the values here by 0.5, making it in half. So at the furthest away camera and at the closest camera, it looks proper. But if I were to choose something, say the 3 shot, go here and change the camera I'm using to the 3 shot, just render this fast. What the problem is, the lines are way too thick for the 3 shot. So what you have to do for this is you need to, instead of have it be linear here, see where it says linear? You don't want it to be linear, you want it to be curved, so at different points it has a different effect. So you change this to curved and you get this. Now here's something I've noticed. This invert button doesn't work when it's it could be a glitch in the beta version of Blender. I'm currently using a bug that might get resolved in a future version, but I'm just going to deselect this invert button in case you are using a future button that the button does do something, because wait, what does this note say? Because right now it doesn't work for the curve, it only works for linear, and that could be a bug. So I'm just going to unselect that to reduce any confusion, even though it shouldn't make a difference in this current version. So, but to invert it, basically, instead of using the invert button, you can just do what I just did, and just, this value was down here, and this value was up here. You can just reverse them, so it's going downhill instead of uphill. The X value is the distance from camera, and the Y value is the thickness. So at 1 it's at full effect, it's the full thickness of the line, the full 3 pixels, and at 0 Y value it's absolutely no thickness. And then the Y value, the closest Y, the X value I mean, at 0x it is at the range minimum of a 1/4 foot, and at the X maximum over here it's at the maximum range of 100 feet. So this does exactly the same thing as I just did, and it'll create these really thick lines. So what I'm going to do next is this this 3 shot is 13 feet from the camera. So to get 13 feet, what I need to do is add another point here. I'm going to make the X value 0.13, because remember, this range of the X is over 100 feet, so 100 feet for 13 feet is 0.13. And then for the Y value, I am going to make it 0.25, so it'll be a 1/4 of the maximum thickness here at this particular spot in distance from the camera. So let's render this and see how that looks. Okay, and I'm much happier with the thickness of these lines. They're not too thick. You get pretty good thickness around most of the image, so I'm very happy with that. Sorry if I'm making you dizzy. I know for some people this makes them dizzy. But now I'm going to move on to a medium shot. So in the scene tab, I'm going to change it to the medium shot camera and see how that looks. Okay, and for the medium shot, you have very little lines or absolutely no lines. You have a little lines on the clothing, but not too much, and it's hard. Oh, you do have some on the hands, but I want them to be a little bit thicker at the medium shot. The medium shot, by the way, is 50 feet away from the character. So I'm going to go to the curve again on the view layer tab under the FreeStyle line style, and I'm going to add another point. This point is going to be at X value of 0.5 because it's 50 feet, and I'm going to make the Y value just a little bit thicker than it was, so 0.125, and then that makes it a little thicker. Now when I render this, we should get thicker lines around this. And as you can see, I'm quite satisfied with this line style. It's the right thickness, I think. Now what we need to do is go back and double check, now that we have these curves, how they're set up properly. We want to check the other parts of the image again and make sure they're still how we want them. So the other cameras. So let's go back to the close-up and render this and make sure it's how we want it. And this is exactly how we want it. It's pretty good. I will think I think they should be a little bit thicker. So what I'm going to do is drag this point out, the starting point here. I'm going to set the X value to 0.025, or 1/4 of a foot, because the is multiplied by 100 to get the distance in feet. And the Y value I'm going to keep at 1, and this should just make it a little bit thicker here at the beginning. Okay, and now it is thicker. This is more of the style I was going for, so this is working pretty well. Now just to test it at the, I'm going to test it at the long shot, which we haven't done yet, I don't think. The long shot is 100 feet away. So it should have absolutely no thickness, because at 100 feet it's set to a minimum value of 0. And as you can see, it worked properly. There's no thickness here. You can imagine, like, this isn't very visible on the screen. Now, I did also have this other camera here, this track camera. Let me just show you this to you in the viewport display. Let me make it the main camera track here. No, wait, not the thing shot. I saw the TV. Oh man, I get it again. The track camera, and as you can see in the animation, it just gets further and further. Oh wait, I don't have the animation set to the full range. Let me set it to the full range. And as you can see, it just gets further away from the camera. This is useful to test. I'm going to show you the completed animation of this here next. This is useful to test for, say, if you were going through a full shot of like just the character running across a field and you were to zoom out to the rest of the field. You would want to make sure that the line style is changing in a way that looks appealing and it's not changing very suddenly. It's going through slight changes. So that's important to test before you get committed to one of these setups for a long project. So this is the setup to use for the Champion of Rome if you're working for Updraftia Studios. This is the setup to use with these points here. I'm probably going to, in the tutorial post for this, I'm going to, which I'll include in the link of the YouTube video description, include all these X and Y values, include the range minimum and the range maximum. So that's it, and don't forget that Updraftia Studios is a hobbyist animation organization. We are project-based. If you're interested in getting involved in animation but don't want to do it professionally, please check out updraftia.com, which I'll show in the screen here how that's spelled.